Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. We begin tonight with all the drama at the Asian Games in China. India's medal tally is rising, so are the instances of Indian athletes being targeted. Chinese officials are being accused of cheating and India says it will file an official complaint. We'll bring you the full story. As we also track the Cricket World Cup, it has started today. The Indian team is in focus with their new orange jersey, but tonight we're looking at the business of cricket. What the World Cup will mean for the economy and for India's soft power. In Canada, Justin Trudeau is looking for a quiet reconciliation with India, but he has unleashed a beast. Khalistani terrorists have gone into overdrive, not just in Canada, but also in the UK and the US. A new report by the US State Department shows how China is influencing global media players with its checkbooks and disinformation campaigns. India has released a negative arms import list. We'll tell you what that means. Britain wants to ban smoking for the next generation. What is their plan and will it work? Why does Australia have a new coin with King Charles on it? How bad is the situation in the Sikkim floods? And what a new survey says about women's promotion at the workplace. We'll get to all this and more. The headlines first. France will send military equipment to Armenia. Azerbaijan slams it as France's militarization policy. Baku says it is ready for EU-mediated talks with Yerevan, a day after the Azeri president turned down a meeting with the Armenian Prime Minister in Spain. Russia to build a naval base in Abkhazia, a breakaway Georgian region. Georgia expresses concern over Moscow's base in the Black Sea coast. It comes amid mounting Ukrainian attacks on Russian warships there. In 2008, Russia and Georgia fought a war. Since then, Moscow has recognized the independence of Abkhazia. Turkish airstrikes on a Kurdish-held region in Syria now. Drones hit military and infrastructure targets. At least 7 people have been killed in the attacks. Since Sunday, Turkey has also launched strikes on Kurds in northern Iraq. Turkey considers the Kurdistan Workers' Party to be a terrorist organization. Uganda's opposition leader Bobi Wine arrested. The 41-year-old was held on his return from a trip abroad. Wine is a former pop star and a prominent critic of President Yoweri Museveni. He made a failed bid for the presidency in 2021. Museveni has ruled Uganda since 1986. Typhoon Koinu lashes southern Taiwan. Thousands of homes are without power, flights cancelled, schools and offices shut. The Category 4 cyclone produced one of the strongest wind gusts ever recorded worldwide. Koinu means puppy in Japanese. And Norwegian author Jon Fosse wins the Nobel Prize in Literature. The 64-year-old's major works include Boathouse and Melancholy. He has often been compared to Samuel Beckett. Fair play is the cornerstone of any sport. You must win fairly. You must lose fairly. And if you are on the sidelines, you must officiate fairly. But maybe not at the Asian Games. Their officials are being accused of cheating, of deliberately targeting Indian athletes. And it's been happening for days now. Even Neeraj Chopra talked about it. His first throw in the javelin final was wiped off. Reason? Some technical glitch. We told you about it yesterday. Now it looks like the Indian team has had enough. They've decided to file an official complaint. Listen to Anju Bobby George. She's the Vice President of the Athletics Federation of India, and she says it's all pre-planned.
So this was a continuous thing. It was not just happened with one athlete. It was with many athletes. This is Asian Games. This is not a small competition. And all the officials actually, it is pre-planned like this. Definitely during the competition, right away we protested. And now we are planning to take it up to the World Athletic Body.
In a previous statement, she went a step ahead. Anju Bobby George accused Chinese officials of cheating, of trying to disturb Indian athletes. What made her say this? A number of events from the last couple of days. Let me recount them for you. First was Sunday's women's 100 meters hurdles. India's Jyoti Yaraji won silver, but not before some major drama. At the start of the race, 2 sprinters were disqualified, Jyoti and a Chinese competitor. They were flagged for a false start, but Jyoti stood her ground. She was adamant that she had stayed behind the line. In the end, the officials reached a compromise. They said, finish the race and we will review later. Jyoti ended up finishing 3rd, and the review showed that she did not have a false start. Only the Chinese sprinter did. So Jyoti's medal was upgraded to silver. Can you imagine the pressure in those moments? To be wrongly disqualified for a false start. It can be the difference between winning and losing. Something similar happened in the javelin throw finals. 2 Indians were part of it, Neeraj Chopra and Kishore Jena. Both of them ran into poor officiating. Neeraj's first throw was a massive one, but the officials could not measure it. So the distance was wiped out. He threw again, but this wasn't as impressive. Next up was Kishore Jena. During his second attempt, he took a tumble after throwing the javelin. He kept his composure though. He fell within the foul line. But the officials cancelled his attempt. That's when Neeraj and Jena walked up to the officials and they protested the decision. After a long argument, the foul was cancelled. The replay showed that Jena had landed within the foul line. So what's the deal here? Why is all of this happening to Indian athletes? Even Neeraj Chopra thinks something is fishy. Listen to his statements, and I'm quoting, "It's the first time something like this has happened to me in a competition. It happened with Jyoti, me and Jena. Something is wrong, but we have got the results and shown them how hard we worked and won medals." Now, to be clear, Neeraj Chopra never does this. He turns up, he throws, he wins. He never questions the officials or the organizers. So for him to speak out is huge. And now the Indian officials have taken note. They're planning to lodge an official protest. The president of the Athletics Federation of India has promised to get to the bottom of this. He says the Chinese, and I'm quoting him, were either stupid or mischievous.
Well, nobody knows what happens in China. Either they are pure stupid or an inefficient, or they are up to mischief. The Athletic Federation will do what it has to do. The Athletic Federation, there are certain protocols which we will follow and take it to its logical conclusion.
I'll tell you why this is strange. Because technology is far more advanced now. In the past, officiating mistakes could be forgiven. You didn't have slow motion cameras or line technology or any of these fancy gadgets. But this is 2023. Technology was supposed to make officiating easy and accurate, and most importantly, neutral. How then did this happen? On social media, the verdict is clear. Chinese officials are trying to sabotage Indian athletes. That's what Anju Bobby George said as well. But how can we know for sure? Well, there are protocols in place. Once the official complaint is filed, we'll have more clarity on what really happened. I will say this though. This is certainly not beyond China. They politicized this Asian Games from day one. In fact, before day one. 3 Indian athletes were denied entry by China. They belonged to Arunachal Pradesh, so Beijing said no entry. Back then, India lodged a diplomatic protest, and now Indian athletes are suffering. These actions are beyond petty. India is having its best ever Asian Games in Hangzhou. India has won 86 medals so far. China is at number 1 with more than 320 medals. So it's not like their position is under threat. Yet these allegations have emerged, and we don't know what will happen after the protest and the investigation, but we can say this. This Asian Games has soured relations further, from the visa row to the cheating allegations. This is not what you expect from a host, and that to a neighboring host. We have 3 more days left in the Games. Let's see if the officiating standards pick up now. Now, when there is war, there is collateral damage. This is true for diplomatic spats as well. India and Canada are in the middle of one, and this is week 3 of the dispute. Trudeau versus India. After blaming India publicly for murder, Justin Trudeau wants to engage constructively and privately. He's seeking quiet reconciliation, but he's left a trail of destruction. He's given new life to the Khalistan issue. These are terrorists and separatists, and they've gone into overdrive. They're putting up posters like this one. It was placed in a Gurdwara in Canada. It confirms Nijjar's affiliation to a terrorist group. It portrays him as a victim, the man whose death has sparked this diplomatic spat, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Khalistanis have become more active in the UK and the US as well. In the UK, there's a rising security risk. Khalistanis are targeting Indian diplomats. Let me tell you what happened last week. India's High Commissioner was in Glasgow. He was invited to a Gurudwara, but he was stopped from entering. Look at these images. You can see that car. The Indian High Commissioner is inside. A Khalistani approaches the car. He tries to stop the Indian diplomat and prevents him from stepping out. So the High Commissioner chose to leave without attending the event. Over the weekend, there were more provocations. Khalistanis protested in London. They gathered outside the Indian mission. They burnt the Indian flag. And who were these protesters? Most wanted terrorists, members of sanctioned groups, Khalistanis who want to break up India. They were all present there in London and they were caught on video. New Delhi has taken note of this. It has demanded that London take action. India wants these individuals arrested. On the radar are groups like Sikhs for Justice, SFJ. It's a banned group in India and its members are active in the UK and Canada. Sikhs for Justice drives many Khalistan campaigns. They're violent. They engage in terrorist activities. They want to break up India to carve out a separate Sikh state. India has crushed this movement, but in countries like Canada and the UK, Khalistanis operate freely. Among them is this man, Paramjit Singh Pamma. He is a wanted man in India, a member of the KTF, the Khalistan Tiger Force. It's the same group that Hardeep Singh Nijjar belonged to. He was the chief of KTF. And Pamma is a member. Now, reports say he attended the protest last weekend. The protest outside the Indian mission in London. He was there. And what is London doing about this? Well, not very much. Khalistani groups in the UK frequently target Indians. You may remember what happened in March. There was a major incident at the Indian High Commission. They call it the India House. Khalistanis gathered there in large numbers. They vandalized the mission and smashed windows. One of them climbed the flagpole and brought the Indian flag down. 7 months later, the UK has finally taken some action. This week, Scotland Yard made an arrest. They held a man linked to the march protest. On what charges? Violent disorder. That's all. Attacking another country's diplomatic mission is disorder. The man has already been released on bail. Now, we cannot confirm his identity, but reports say he's one of the dozens of individuals named by Indian investigators. Then you have the US, same story. Khalistani terrorists are active here. Sikhs for Justice organizes referendums in America, and Washington turns a blind eye. And there's nothing to suggest that this will change anytime soon.
We're not going to comment on the unofficial referendum. What I will just say is that broadly across the board, individuals have the right to freedoms of speech, right to peacefully assemble in the United States, all of which are in line with our First Amendment protections and adherence, of course, to any appropriate federal and local regulations.
He says the referendum is unofficial, but it enjoys constitutional protections. This may not go down well with New Delhi. The Americans realize this too. A new report says they're being cautious. It describes what's happening behind the scenes, how the US plans to navigate these tensions. The report says America wants to, quote unquote, let things play out. They're apprehensive about pushing India too hard. And the same report also mentions Eric Garcetti, the US ambassador to India. Apparently, Garcetti has told his team that America's relations with India could get worse and that the US may have to reduce contact with Indian officials. The American embassy in New Delhi has dismissed this report. They issued a strong statement today. It says Garcetti remains committed to his engagements in India. Clearly, the Canadian Prime Minister has put his allies in a fix. His accusations have strained many relations. London and Washington are in a bind. They want to show support to Ottawa, but at the same time, they do not want to alienate New Delhi. And this could affect diplomatic business. It could shift priorities until the tensions ease. Having said that, the bigger worry still remains this: the activities of the Khalistani groups. Trudeau has let the genie out of the bottle. It will be very hard to put it back in. Meanwhile, in India, it's World Cup time. The tournament has kicked off in the city of Ahmedabad. The first match is a repeat of the 2019 final, England versus New Zealand. But the focus, of course, is on Team India. They're playing a home World Cup after 12 years, and there is added pressure. Since 2011, All World Cups have been won by host countries. Australia in 2015 and England in 2019. So the expectation is India should win. But we'll keep the punditry out for now. Instead, let's focus on the business side of things. How much money does the ICC World Cup make? How much does the host earn? And what are the overall finances of cricket? Reports say India will earn $2.6 billion from this World Cup. That's around 22,000 crore rupees. This money comes from a lot of places. Let me show you the breakup. Television rights is the biggest chunk. It makes up around 12,000 crore rupees. Then comes screenings and food deliveries. A lot of people will be hosting their friends, maybe watching the match together. That is expected to generate some 5,000 crore rupees. Ticket sales is the third source. It makes up around 2,000 crore rupees. Then you have travel, merchandise and event management. Put together 22,000 crore rupees. And don't forget, it's festive season in India. So all in all, people will be spending a lot more, which is good for the economy. But I must warn you, there's a downside as well. All this spending is expected to drive up inflation. By how much? The projection is around 0.2%. I don't think that's stopping any fans out there. After all, it's a home World Cup. There will be 48 matches played across 10 venues. The final will be played in Ahmedabad on the 19th of November. And fingers crossed, India makes it. Even sponsors will be hoping for that, for India to make it to the final. Because if India goes all the way, it means more viewership. And more viewership equals more traction. We are talking about a lot of money here. Sponsors are spending around $240 million. That's around 2,000 crore rupees. Advertisements are pretty expensive here. Consider a 10-second slot, a 10-second ad slot. Sponsors will have to pay 30 lakh rupees for that. 30 lakh rupees for 10 seconds, which is around 3 lakh rupees per second. It's 40% higher than the last World Cup. And who are these sponsors? Coca-Cola, Google and Hindustan Unilever are among the ad sponsors. The ICC partners include Saudi Aramco, Emirates and Nissan. So it's truly global. We have companies from the US, West Asia and East Asia taking part. It shows you how popular the game is. But this popularity is also a bit skewed. Let me explain why. Cricket is said to have more than 1 billion fans. Most of them are in one location, South Asia. You have India, Pakistan and Bangladesh put together. That's a lot of people. But outside South Asia, the fan base is much smaller. Just look at the other cricket-playing nations. England, they have a thriving football scene. Australia, their first love is rugby, just like New Zealand. And in South Africa, it's again football. So India is the nerve center of world cricket. We control the fans, the money and the politics. Take revenue, for example. The BCCI, which is the Indian Cricket Board, gets 38% of the ICC's total revenue. There is no one else in double digits. India gets 38%. Every year, Indian cricket raises $1.5 billion in sponsorship and media rights. And the cash cow is the IPL, the Indian Premier League. Do you know how much the BCCI makes from it? More than 2,400 crore rupees, which is $280 million. I know it sounds like everything is going well, but beneath all this money, there are some problems. Cricket is facing an identity crisis too. You see, this World Cup is the 50-over World Cup, aka the one-day World Cup. It's the ICC's flagship event, the most important in the cricketing calendar. But one-day cricket itself is losing relevance. India used to play 30 to 40 matches in the late 1990s and 2000s. We're talking 50-over cricket here, 30 to 40 matches. But that number has come down. India played just 20 matches in 2018 and 24 matches last year, 21 matches this year. So interest in 50-over cricket is falling. 2020 is on the rise, and you can blame time constraints for that. A one-day match takes around 9 hours to complete. Not everyone has that kind of time to spare anymore. That's one problem. The second is cricket's limited reach. We say it's a World Cup, but how many countries are taking part? Just 10. Compare that to the FIFA World Cup. 32 teams participated in Qatar, 48 will take part in the next one. So cricket needs to grow. It can't be limited to Commonwealth countries. It has to capture the world's attention, and India will have to lead that charge. Because only the BCCI has the money and the reach to do this, not to mention the biggest stars. India has them. We've seen some progress already. This year's Asian Games includes cricket, There is also talk of cricket featuring in the 2028 Olympics. That's one way to go global. India stands to gain a lot by leading this change. It could be New Delhi's new soft power play. And just a reminder before we end the story, make sure you catch our extensive coverage on Firstpost. 50 days, multiple venues. We'll be following the men in blue as they chase World Cup glory. China has an image problem. Well, everyone knows that by now. You hear China, you think wolf warrior or death trap or Uyghur genocide. So Beijing is plotting a global media campaign. In simple words, an image makeover. An American report has revealed details about this Chinese plot. 4 things stand out: censorship, data harvesting, harassment of journalists, and covert purchase of foreign outlets. The idea here is twofold. The first is to run positive coverage on China, to create a favorable perception. The second is to suppress critical news, like the military drills near Taiwan, or the crackdowns in Hong Kong, or the genocide in Xinjiang. You try to suppress it. Apparently, Pakistan is among their top targets. That's right. China wants to control the Pakistani media, and there are 2 questions here: why and how. The why is pretty obvious. China has invested billions of dollars in Pakistan. It's a key part of their Belt and Road project, so public opinion is important. It's easier to invest and operate if the locals like you. If not, it could be trouble. So that answers the why. Now, the how is more complicated. How will China do it? The US report mentions media cooperation in the CPEC. That's the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Within this, multiple projects have been launched, like the CPEC Rapid Response Information Network and the China-Pakistan Media Corridor. And this last one, the Media Corridor, is very ambitious. Both sides have pledged to create a media nerve center. What will the center do? A number of things, like collect inputs from Chinese think tanks, opinion leaders and companies, convert key reports into Urdu, translate them into Urdu, push Chinese embassy statements into Pakistan's official press release system, and finally respond to criticism of China. I know it sounds a bit complicated, but just know this: China is trying to control the narrative in Pakistani press. That's the aim. They want to amplify Chinese statements, highlight what Chinese companies are doing, and limit criticism of China. And remember, this is a friendly country. Pakistan and China are supposed to be iron brothers, yet this is what Beijing does to them. So you can imagine what awaits rivals and enemies. By the way, Islamabad has not approved this nerve center project yet, but other levels of cooperation are happening. Not just in Pakistan, this is happening globally, in fact. Reports say China has around 100 influencers on its payroll. They operate in more than 20 languages. What is their job? Keep spreading Chinese propaganda. Another method is partnerships. China's state-run CCTV has deals with 1,700 foreign agencies. I'll repeat that. The Chinese state-run CCTV has deals with 1,700 foreign agencies. They give them scripts, videos, and reports. Look at this one. It shows a delegation of Muslim countries in Xinjiang. They're visiting museums. They're meeting the residents. They're having the local food. It looks like the perfect place for cultural tourism. But we know it's not. We know that Xinjiang is where China has jailed 1 million Uyghurs. Now, if you saw this video without context, you wouldn't know that. That's what China is trying to do. A third strategy is buying influence. Just outright payments. Pay money. In 2021, the US Justice Department revealed some details. China was giving big money to American newspapers. And just look at these numbers. Around $700,000 were paid to the Time magazine. $371,000 to the Financial Times. Around $300,000 to Foreign Policy magazine and $270,000 to the Los Angeles Times. Now, these are prominent newspapers in the US, and turns out Chinese state media gave them money. Reports say even the likes of New York Times and Washington Post received money. But they're yet to be confirmed. Now, the US media landscape is huge. It is widely read, and it's well funded. Maybe they can withstand the Chinese pressure and the Chinese money. But what about countries where the media is struggling for funds? That Chinese money will look very appealing to them. Beijing has done that in countries like Chile and Kenya. State-run Xinhua Agency has the largest correspondent network in Africa. Their operations are centered in Nairobi. The same city hosts the African Bureau of CGTN, that's a Chinese state-run channel. China Daily publishes from Nairobi, and so does China Radio International. These investments have created some 500 jobs in Kenya. Most of these journalists are trained in China, so you can imagine their worldview. Beijing is spending billions of dollars on this global plan to influence media narratives abroad. The easier option would be to become a responsible country, to not invade others or crack down on its own citizens. I guess for Xi Jinping, that's too much to ask. From covert operations, let's talk about some real firepower. India is charting a new course in defense. It wants to make sophisticated arms at home. And to achieve this, India has deployed a different kind of weapon: import bans. New Delhi has come up with a negative arms import list. This is a new way to promote Make in India in defense. And what is this negative list? It names a wide range of defense equipment, and once something goes on this negative list, you cannot import it. The defense forces can no longer get this item from outside. They'll have to depend on domestic sources. And they have broadly two options. Number one, defense public sector undertakings. These are companies like HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. These are defense suppliers, but they're owned by the government of India. The second option is the private sector. Earlier, the government had a monopoly on defense manufacturing. But in 2001, this sector was opened up, and since then, India has issued 584 industrial licenses to 358 companies. They make different kinds of gear. Now, until now, they face stiff competition from foreign players. India wants to give them more space. Economists have a term for such policies. They call it import substitution. The idea is that once you block certain imports, there is greater incentive to build in India. Hence the negative import list. They also have another name: Positive Indigenization List, or PIL. And the concept, by the way, is not new. India started releasing these lists back in 2020, and since then 5 lists have come out. The latest one was released this week. How many items have been embargoed so far? More than 500. 500 items have been embargoed. In the latest list, some 98 items were added. And India is setting ambitious goals here. The embargoed items include high-end gear, also futuristic weapons and systems. Look at the kind of items it includes: infantry combat vehicles, all-terrain vehicles, unmanned aerial vehicles or drones of various types, medium-range precision kill systems, radars, armor plates, sensors, equipments for fighter jets, and maritime surveillance planes. So you get the picture. India aims to build major systems at home. But is this a realistic goal, and what kind of timelines are they looking at? India's Defense Ministry has given some indications. Apparently, these systems are already in development. Indian manufacturers are working on them, and New Delhi is confident of success, which is why it has expanded the embargo list. And how soon can Indian forces get this equipment? The Defense Ministry says in the next 5 to 10 years. In the previous lists, India restricted the import of lightweight tanks, naval utility helicopters, artillery guns, different kinds of missiles, destroyers, shipborne cruise missiles, light combat aircraft, basic trainer aircraft, multi-barrel rocket launchers, just to name a few. So in the next 5 to 6 years, India wants to indigenize these platforms. What does this tell you? What do these lists and items tell you? 2 things. 1, they cover a wide range of wares and all branches of service. And 2, the landscape of procurements is set to change. Right now, India is the largest defense importer. The forces use fewer Indian weapons. In the next decade, the share of Indian arms is set to go up. They'll go in larger numbers in the procurement mix. So New Delhi has set clear targets. By 2025, India wants to achieve a defense production turnover of $25 billion and $5 billion worth of defense exports. That is the target. But why make the push for indigenous weapons now? Because it's necessary. India is taking lessons from recent events. First the pandemic, then the supply chain shocks, and now the war in Ukraine. For most of its weapons, India still depends on imports. And this is a strategic vulnerability. India's Navy chief has spoken about it. I have a quote from what he said. Listen to this. Self-reliance, therefore, is becoming equally important for Indian industry across sectors and more so in the defense sector. Dependence on others for one's defense needs is a strategic vulnerability that must be overcome. So New Delhi is taking proactive steps to make a shift now by selectively banning some imports. India is on the right path towards achieving self-reliance in defense. Now, staying with India, there's news from the Himalayas. A tragedy is unfolding in the state of Sikkim. Flash floods have brought the state to its knees. At least 14 people have died. More than 100 are missing. This includes 22 army personnel. All these people were swept away by the raging waters of the river Tista. Sikkim is located high in the eastern Himalayas. It is home to hundreds of glaciers and glacial lakes. One of them, the South Lonak Lake, burst yesterday. It happened in the early hours of the day, and it released a deluge. Water from the lake flowed into the Tista River. The river's water levels rose. They roared through Sikkim, and they've left devastation in their wake. Here's our report.
Disaster struck Sikkim in the early hours of Wednesday. A cloudburst triggered flash floods. The water flowed down the Tista River. It was flowing at over 50 kilometers per hour at some places, bringing calamity to those caught in its fury. At least 14 people have died. Many more are injured. Over 100 are still missing. This includes over 20 members of the Indian Army. Search operations are underway. They're expected to last a while. The true extent of casualties won't be known for a few more days at least. About 25,000 people have been affected by the flash floods. The state has set up multiple relief camps. It's providing shelter to those who have been displaced. Meanwhile, about 3,000 people are stranded around the state. Many of them are tourists. Rescue operations are on. Over 150 people have been rescued. The floods were unsparing. Water from the Tista tore down trees, cars, houses, and anything else that got in its way.
As of now, this area has been totally damaged and my own mud house has been destroyed completely. The front side of the nearby building is also damaged. The lower areas of Dikchu village are also damaged.
The greatest damage may have been to Sikkim's power sector. The flash flood destroyed a hydroelectric dam, the Tista 3 dam in Chungtang. All the water in the reservoir was added to the Tista. 2 other dams have been affected as well, the Tista 4 and 5. Damage assessments are still underway, but reports say they haven't shattered like the dam in Chungtang.
There are 2 bridges. They are gone. That road there, that too is gone.
The dam in Chungtang was the biggest hydropower project in Sikkim. It was part of a 1,200 megawatt power project worth about 14,000 crore rupees. That's about $1.7 billion. All of that washed away. And the surrounding areas were washed away with it. The disaster unfolded because a glacial lake burst. It began at the South Lonak Lake in North Sikkim. Glacial lakes form when glaciers melt. The melting water begins accumulating and forms an unstable lake. They're especially unstable when they're as high up as the South Lonak Lake. Often, these lakes burst. That leads to flash floods like the one we saw in Sikkim yesterday. Lonak Lake burst after heavy rains caused it to overflow. Till Tuesday night, the lake covered an area of 168 hectares. Today, its size has been reduced to about 60 hectares. About a third of the lake's area has been drained, all within a few hours after it burst. That's what set off yesterday's chain of events. The effects of the disaster aren't limited to Sikkim. Further downstream, the state of West Bengal is also dealing with the aftermath. Some residents have had to evacuate their homes.
We thought the water level would not rise as it was very low. But as the water was released from the dam, the level started rising slowly and had almost reached its limit. But then after the dam burst, our houses were washed away. We had relocated ourselves to higher ground. All our houses are damaged.
It will take a while for things to return to normal, but these disasters are likely to become more common in the days to come. The flash floods began due to a glacial lake bursting. These lakes formed due to glaciers melting, a process accelerated by climate change. As the planet gets warmer, more glacial lakes will burst. Unless something is done, Sikkim, which houses hundreds of these lakes, will be at the forefront of more such disasters.
Banning cigarettes. It's a topic that has long sparked debate and on both sides of the aisle. One side advocates for personal freedom, the right to make your life choices. The other side battles for public health, and in the UK it looks like the second side has won. London is making a case for banning cigarettes. They want to phase out smoking, and leading the charge is Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
So I propose that in future we raise the smoking age by 1 year every year. That means a 14-year-old today will never legally be sold a cigarette, and that they and their generation can grow up smoke-free.
So how exactly will this work? Sunak plans to raise the age of smoking. It will happen gradually. The legal age for smoking will be raised by 1 year every year until eventually no one is able to smoke. Let me explain. Suppose the legal age is 16. So if you're less than 16 years of age, you're not allowed to smoke. But next year, the legal age will be raised to 17. So when you grow 1 year older, you're still not allowed to smoke. The year after, the legal age will be raised to 18 and so on. So basically, you will never qualify. That's the plan. It's ambitious, but not new. Rishi Sunak got the blueprint from New Zealand. Last year, New Zealand became the first country to ban smoking. This was done for those under the age of 14. And New Zealand has implemented an annually rising smoking age, the same that Sunak is proposing. They raise the legal age every year. The idea is to outlaw smoking for the next generation. Now, the UK wants to do the same, but it has a few hurdles ahead of it. The first hurdle is implementation, and arguably the biggest. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has just floated the idea. British MPs will have to vote on it. If approved, plans need to be set in place. It will be a long drawn process. The second is backlash, the second challenge. The tobacco industry is a money spinner. Last year, they raised over $12 billion in taxes in the UK. If there's a ban, this figure will drop. So tax revenues will fall. Plus, it could create a black market for cigarettes. Currently, smoking is legal, so cigarettes are not sold illegally. But if there is an age ban, that could change.
I don't think it'll work. No, I think they'll reach an age level and then they won't do any adding on of the years. I think it's quite sensible to try and persuade people not to smoke. But I don't think you'll find that 58-year-olds will be banned from buying cigarettes.
Right now, the world has more than 1.3 billion tobacco users. Every year, 8 million people die because of it. And of course, this is a critical step for the UK. It's also something that countries like India could think about. India is home to 12% of the world's smokers. We have more than 267 million smokers. And it sounds like a conservative estimate, 267 million. Every year, 1 million people die in India from tobacco-related diseases. There is a slew of anti-smoking rules. Those rules are already in place, like ban on smoking in public places and no sale of cigarettes near educational institutions. But that has not stopped anyone. People still smoke in public and cigarettes are still sold near schools. We haven't yet thought of an outright ban like the UK, but India is mulling a ban on the sale of loose cigarettes. The government is yet to take a decision on that. For now, let's go back to the question that we began with. Should cigarettes die on their own, or should they die at the hand of the state? Many would argue that this ban is a futile step. There are so many ways to beat it. If you are not allowed to buy a cigarette, you could get it from an older friend or colleague. Like any addiction, there are ways around it. And people will most likely try to circumvent the ban, but that applies to all bans, honestly. Such moves are not so much about banning as about discouraging. It's about making it difficult for people to access a cigarette. And it's still likely that 2 out of 3 people will still light it. But even if one person is dissuaded, that's one life saved. Because birth date bans are far from perfect. They may or may not bring down smoking rates, but we say at least it's a start. Now let's turn our attention to Britain's one-time penal colony, Australia. The land down under still seems to be under England's thumb. Technically, it began getting independence from the UK in 1901, and we say began because it was not completed till 1986. It took 85 years for Australia to throw off the British yoke, and still it retains vestiges of its former masters. In fact, it often celebrates these colonial ties. Take, for example, what happened earlier today. Australia unveiled a new $1 coin, Australian dollar. It's golden and glamorous, and it features a familiar face, King Charles III of England. The British monarch's face will now begin circulating in Australia. And with it, Australians will renew their fealty to their old colonial oppressors. Here's our report.
Australia can be a strange place. It's a former frontier colony infested with all manner of dangerous creatures. Once it was the prison colony of the British Crown. Condemned prisoners were shipped off there to remove them from British society. And in the harsh outback, these people somehow thrived, eventually winning for themselves autonomy and then independence. They've gone on to become the most developed nation in the Southern Hemisphere. A colony of outcasts now has a higher Human Development Index score than its former colonizer. And yet, despite all this progress, some things never seem to change. Like the presence of the colonizer's first family on Australian coinage. Today, amid great fanfare, Australia released its new $1 coin. The golden coin features King Charles III of England. He's seen without a crown, staring far off to the left. This is in contrast to coins featuring his mother. Old Queen Elizabeth featured her right profile. The directional change is all part of tradition, continuing a trend that has lasted centuries. Australia's Assistant Treasury Minister revealed all this with a great deal of excitement.
The new effigy is designed by the Royal Mint in London and has royal approval. This is a historic day. For 7 decades, Australians have seen a queen on their coins. This will be the first time for most Australians that they have held a circulating coin which has a king on it rather than a queen. I'm really excited to announce that the first circulating coin to have the effigy of the king will be the $1 coin. It'll be the iconic Mob of Ruse coin, which has been circulating in Australia since 1984. We expect to have those coins out in people's hands by Christmas.
By Christmas, about 10 million of these coins will be in circulation. Then there will be others. 5, 10, 20 and 50-cent coins will soon feature Charles III. $2 coins as well. Eventually, Charles might have a home in every Australian pocket and wallet. The question is, why? Why does Australia cling to its colonial shackles? Is there nothing else it would rather have on its coinage? Why does Canberra keep wanting to pay tribute to the British royal family? Think about it. This is a family that oversaw the world's largest colonial empire. They extracted wealth from every corner of the globe, impoverished millions, profited from the transatlantic slave trade, and in Australia's case, created a gigantic penal colony to exile undesirables. No matter how you look at it, the British royal family will forever be linked to injustice. So, for a former colony to honor them with coinage reeks of a national Stockholm syndrome. Earlier this year, Australia had looked like it was overcoming its colonial hangover. It decided to remove old Queen Elizabeth's face from its $5 notes. This was the last banknote to feature a British royal. The new ones have an indigenous Australian design, which makes sense. But the coinage decision does not. Consider that the smaller denominations sometimes cost more to mint than their inherent value. Depending on the value of copper and nickel on a given day, minting 5, 10 and 20 cent coins may be a loss-making proposition. Imagine your government actually bearing a loss so your coins bear the visage of your old colonizer, even if he is still your titular head of state. Australia's Assistant Treasury Minister called the new coins historic. It would have been truly historic had Australia decided to oust the British royals from their currency completely. But it seems Canberra isn't ready for that. Perhaps by the time William or George take the throne, Australia will have had enough. For now, though, Charles will get to line Australian pockets for years to come.
A decade ago, a book was published. It was called Lean In. It was written by former Meta COO Sheryl Sandberg. The book encourages women to assert themselves, to lean in both at work and at home. Now, Lean In sold over 4 million copies. What made it so successful? One data point among other things. It said most men apply for positions when they meet just 60% of the job requirements, but for women, this number stands at 100%. Meaning, women do not apply for a job unless they meet 100% of the requirements, but men apply with just 60%. People were shocked and inspired because they could relate. This information was quoted in viral posts, books, and dinner table conversations. It was a super hit, even though it was factually incorrect. Years later, the statistic was debunked. It was based on anecdotal evidence, not scientific proof. Now, despite no factual backing, people continue to quote this statistic because they resonate with it. Company cultures often glorify confidence even when it's unfounded, where men tend to overestimate their abilities and women undersell themselves. So a man's potential is more valued than his female counterparts. And here's the result. A study has been published by McKinsey and Lean.in.org. It says, last year, for every 100 men promoted to a manager role, only 87 women received the same boost. In other words, women are not being promoted as much as men. Now, this is not the first study to say so. So by now, the inequality should be clear, but in case it's not, let me debunk some myths and counter-arguments that may follow. Some of you may say, there is inequality, yes, but good progress has been made. Well, let's look at the numbers. In 2019, for every 100 men, only 72 women were promoted. In 2021, for every 100 men, 86 women were promoted. And in 2022, this number inched up to 87. So yes, progress has been made, but it's seriously depressing. Next argument. Why don't women just ask for promotions? Well, research says they do. Women are asking for promotions at the same rate as men, yet they are being overlooked. In fact, women are more ambitious than before the pandemic. About 80% women said they'd like a promotion. In 2019, this figure was 70%. Now, another common quip is this. Ambition is not everything. They're probably not performing as well as men are. Last year, a study was published by MIT. It found that female employees are less likely to be promoted than male counterparts, despite outperforming them and being less likely to quit. So here is the conclusion. Women are performing well at work, sometimes even outperforming their male counterparts. They're ambitious, they're voicing their need for promotions, they're doing pretty much everything they can, but promotions are still passing them by. Why do you think that happens? There is only one explanation. It's the difference in the way men and women receive their promotions. Research says men are promoted based on their potential, while women have to have already proven it. So it's about potential versus proof. And we aren't saying that hiring managers are all women haters. It's just that deciding whom to promote can be tricky business. Candidates must demonstrate strong skills, not just at their current level. Their managers should also believe that they can perform at the next level. So managers should notice potential. And it is not easily demonstrated. Different people shine in different ways. It's a subjective matter. It leaves room for bias. And bias at work is a deeply ingrained issue. Traits that people typically associate with leadership, like assertiveness and strength, are also associated with masculinity. Plus, men possess the majority leadership roles across industries. The global share of women in leadership roles stands at 31%. So it becomes difficult to imagine women in positions of power, and female workers bear the brunt of this. They face perpetual skepticism. After all, how can someone prove that they can be a manager until they are a manager? There is no straightforward solution to this problem. Social bias cannot be undone overnight, but shifting the onus from women to a robust and radical scoring mechanism could help. Because the promotion gap is real, and it's here to stay unless we actively choose to demote it. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Mexico, a female police officer jumped in front of a motorbike to stop 3 thieves from escaping. In the US, over 1,500 bisons were rounded up in South Dakota to maintain the health of the species. And in London, climate protesters interrupted a performance of Les Miserables. They locked themselves to the stage by using bicycle locks. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1962, the world's most famous secret agent hit the theaters. James Bond made his debut with the movie Dr. No. Portraying the role of 007 was actor Sean Connery. 70 years later, James Bond has become a cultural symbol. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
I think they're remnants of what all these 40 acres are divided into.
It's the dream of every cricketer, the ultimate glory. Few manage to keep their date with destiny. But for many, it's been heartbreaks and a cross to bear. The Holy Grail is here in India. I'm Rupa Ramani, and Firstpost brings you the ringside view. We bring you the Cup of Dreams, Cricket World Cup coverage like never before.